April 2019. The air thick with the scent of damp earth enveloped the isolated White Clay Creek Preserve, just a few miles from downtown Wilmington, Delaware. Light from the Geological Survey team's equipment pierced through 15 years of accumulated darkness, illuminating an object no one ever expected to find here. Central, we need support at the preserve and a forensics unit immediately. The field supervisor's voice echoed through the moss-covered trees, so cold it froze the entire team in place. What had begun as a routine soil erosion survey had now become something entirely different, something that would finally answer the haunting question that had lingered over Wilmington since the winter of 2004. A car buried deep beneath layers of soil and decayed leaves on a hillside, and nearby, the rotted frame of a driver's seat containing human remains. That car was Ethan Merrick's Porsche, the man who had mysteriously vanished one December evening, never to be seen again. For nearly a decade and a half, Ethan's disappearance remained an unanswered question hanging over the Delaware community. An unfinished date with Lauren Bishop, an unlocked door, a phone that went dead after exactly 17 minutes, and one person everyone suspected, but no one had enough evidence to hold for a second interview. Before we continue with this shocking story, take a second to subscribe and like the video. Your support helps bring these forgotten cases back into the light, and the algorithms will make sure you never miss another cold case in the future. The discovery of the Porsche was not just the resolution of a missing person case. It was the first domino in a chain of events that would uncover secrets buried deep in Delaware for 15 years. Because when authorities finally identified the suspect and executed the arrest in 2019, that person was not a stranger passing through Wilmington, not a predator lurking in the old forest. It was someone the community greeted every morning, trusted, and considered an essential part of their lives, and the one who had carried this horrifying truth for all those years. The Ethan Merrick case is not just a mystery solved. It is proof of the persistence of investigators who refused to let the file gather dust, of a victim's family who never accepted silence, and of modern forensic progress that finally gave a voice to the dead. It is also the story of a community once divided. When Ethan vanished in 2004, suspicion spread through Wilmington like wildfire through dry woods. Neighbors turned on each other. Families who had once been close grew wary. The search for Ethan exposed the hidden cracks in this small American community. Those cracks would shatter wide open when the truth was finally revealed after 15 years. What makes this case especially haunting is that the answer had always been so close. The prime suspect had been interviewed right in the initial investigation, then slipped through the net. For years, that person attended Ethan's memorials, shook hands with his friends, looked straight into the eyes of the grieving, and maintained an innocent facade while hiding an unimaginable secret. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I'm always curious how these stories connect us, no matter the distance. Tonight, we'll go back to the winter of 2004, follow the decades-long search for answers, and uncover the stunning forensic turning point that brought closure to one of Delaware's coldest cases. This is a story of loss, persistence, deception, and finally, justice delayed, but never denied. Late 2004, the Greenville area of Wilmington, Delaware, still held the familiar quiet rhythm of suburbia, tree-lined streets, secluded houses set far back behind stone-paved driveways, and the early winter air chilly but calm. Against that backdrop, 41-year-old Ethan Merrick lived alone in a small house on Barley Mill Road, keeping a steady routine between work, morning runs, and casual meetups with Lauren Bishop, the woman he had started seeing the previous month. Lauren had recently separated from her ex-husband, Mark Ellison, a tense relationship she was trying to escape, though traces of Mark's controlling presence still lingered in her life in ways that were hard to define. The day Ethan disappeared unfolded like any other. He answered a few work emails, stopped by the grocery store near Kennett Pike, and called Lauren to confirm their evening plans. By early evening, neighbors saw the lights in Ethan's house flick on and off several times, a usual sign he was getting ready to go out. Around 9:45 p.m., Ethan's Porsche pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the main road. It was the last time anyone saw him. When the appointed time came, Lauren didn't see Ethan arrive. She called, but got no answer, texted with no reply. This went on for over an hour, completely out of character for Ethan's punctual and quick-to-respond nature. Worry grew as Lauren couldn't determine if he had changed plans. She decided to drive to his house to check. When she arrived, the driveway was empty, no sign the car had returned. The porch light was still on as when Ethan left. The front door was unlocked, the house silent with no sound or movement inside. Lauren stepped in, called his name, but the house remained completely quiet. No signs of disturbance, nothing out of place. Yet Ethan's absence grew more inexplicable as time passed without any contact from him. Unable to locate him or find any clue he had altered his plans, Lauren faced a possibility her instincts told her was dangerous. After a few minutes of consideration and a second check of the entire first floor, she pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and reported Ethan Merrick missing under suspicious circumstances. Lauren's call was transferred to Newcastle County Dispatch around 11 p.m., and within minutes, a patrol unit along with the on-duty Detective Samuel Ortiz was dispatched to the house on Barley Mill Road. When Ortiz arrived, Lauren stood on the porch visibly tense. She recounted the evening's events, from Ethan not showing up for their date, not answering calls, to discovering his unlocked and empty house. Ortiz asked her to specify the exact time of last contact, Ethan's expected schedule, and anything from the day that might help establish a timeline or direction of travel. From the nearest neighbor, he confirmed details matching Lauren's account. The Porsche left the driveway around 9:45 p.m. House lights flicked on and off normally before Ethan left, and no unusual sounds before or after. Entering the house, Ortiz conducted a quick initial assessment. The front door showed no signs of forced entry, hinges and lock intact. First 4 rooms showed no evidence of struggle, no broken items or disturbed furniture. Tabletops, chairs, and bookshelves displayed no unusual interference. He checked areas typically targeted in break-ins, rear windows, garage, side entrance all secure and untouched. Ortiz asked Lauren for more details on Ethan's habits, work hours, grocery stop, people he might have contacted that day, purpose of the evening meetup, and whether he had mentioned any last-minute changes. She confirmed Ethan was consistent, rarely altered plans suddenly, and almost never turned his phone off in the evening. Initial findings showed no clear evidence of assault or burglary, but the fact that Ethan left home, failed to reach his destination, made no further contact, and did not return over an extended period ruled out a routine missing person case. Ortiz cross-checked all information gathered that night against the 2004 criteria for adult missing person, voluntary departure, technical communication issues, sudden plan changes, or psychological factors, but none fit Ethan's situation. Instead, everything pointed to one conclusion. His disappearance had no clear explanation. Concluding the initial assessment, Ortiz classified the case as missing under suspicious circumstances, requested access to Ethan's personal records for background, and compiled a list of 24-hour priority actions. The most critical window to avoid losing leads: review all cameras within 5 miles of the house, check call logs and cell signals for the day, verify last contacts, cross-reference credit card activity that evening, and organize an initial search along Ethan's usual routes. After final scene documentation, Ortiz left the house to begin deploying investigative steps in the urgent time frame, as every passing hour narrowed the chances of finding useful traces. In the first hours after logging the suspicious missing person case, Detective Ortiz prioritized the most critical task, gathering peripheral data to establish Ethan's initial direction of travel. Greenville was not as camera-dense as downtown Wilmington, but several useful recording points existed around commercial corridors and major intersections. Ortiz started with the stretch connecting Barley Mill Road to Kennett Pike, where a 24-hour ATM and a convenience store served as frequent data sources for regional missing persons cases. He requested all footage from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., then moved to 2 Delaware Department of Transportation traffic cameras for the same time frame. The images were limited in sharpness by 2004 equipment standards, but sufficient to identify color and vehicle type. After enhancement and comparison, Ortiz confirmed a dark-colored Porsche matching Ethan's appeared at the ATM camera around 9:52 p.m. The footage showed the vehicle moving steadily, no signs of stopping or turning around, and turning right onto Newport Gap Pike. This was a key milestone, confirming that Ethan or someone driving his car had left Greenville less than 10 minutes after the neighbors saw the car depart the driveway. Ortiz continued analyzing footage from a traffic camera about a mile beyond the ATM. One at the SR-41 intersection captured headlights moving northwest, though the low resolution made license plate or driver identification impossible. Still, it reinforced the hypothesis that the Porsche continued away from residential areas rather than looping back toward Wilmington. Compiling the route data, Ortiz identified 3 primary branches the car could have taken: SR-41 toward Hawkinson, secondary roads into lower density areas, and the route extending toward the edge of White Clay Creek Preserve, where camera coverage was virtually non-existent. He created a zone search map based on these three potential directions, combined with the last recorded cell signal before the phone went dead at 10,002 p.m. Given average distances from the ATM to intersection points, the car could have traveled 2 to 5 miles in that window. Ortiz coordinated an expanded 5-mile radius search from the last recorded road segment, prioritizing small turnoffs, unlogged parking areas, and terrain allowing a vehicle to leave the main road unnoticed. The search map was distributed to all active night patrol units, with immediate reporting required for any dark-colored vehicle in an unusual location. Patrol teams were divided geographically to sweep relevant routes, especially the Greenville-Hockinson border area, with many unlit stretches easily overlooked from a distance. Ortiz simultaneously checked private business cameras, nearby gas stations, auto shops, and a night-operating warehouse, since any image of Ethan's car after 9:52 p.m. could significantly narrow the investigation. Although initial results showed no clear capture of the license plate or driver, the Porsche's appearance at 3 video points within the same time frame allowed Ortiz to conclude the vehicle had left Greenville in a consistent direction, with no signs of stopping or abrupt route changes. This ruled out Ethan returning home or encountering an incident near his residence. With the peripheral data collected, Ortiz completed a vehicle movement map for the narrow window of 9:45 p.m. to 10:02 p.m., positing that this leg of travel was the first and most critical clue to locating the victim. In his quick report to command, he assessed the urgency as elevated, since none of the peripheral data indicated Ethan had voluntarily altered his plans. While patrol teams continued sweeping routes and expanding the search, Ortiz noted this was only the first layer of data but sufficient to establish the vehicle's direction as the initial key to the entire investigation. Based on all peripheral data gathered in the early hours, Detective Ortiz began constructing a preliminary timeline to establish the most accurate chronology from Ethan's departure until complete loss of communication. The starting point remained unchanged. Neighbors recorded the Porsche leaving the driveway around 9:45 p.m., coinciding with when Lauren began calling Ethan without response. From there, Ortiz cross-referenced the Kennett Pike ATM camera data showing the vehicle at 9:52 p.m., moving steadily with no signs of stopping. The alignment of these two timestamps was critical to determining the vehicle's average speed upon leaving Greenville, allowing an estimate of the distance Ethan could have covered before the phone lost signal. Carrier data confirmed Lauren's final call to Ethan rang unanswered at 9:51 p.m., and the phone completely lost signal at 10:02 p.m. This created a 17-minute window from departure to complete communication loss, a significant detail, because on most routes around Greenville, 17 minutes was enough to leave the residential area, pass through a major corridor, and enter a region with less light or surveillance. Ortiz immediately flagged 3 high-probability travel directions based on ATM camera position and SR-41 intersection footage. First, toward Hockinson, a hilly area with many small branching roads, ideal for a vehicle to depart the main route undetected. Second, toward Newark, an area with higher traffic density but also many unrecorded turns. And finally, toward White Clay Creek Preserve, a large preserve sparse on cameras with forested terrain capable of concealing a vehicle for extended periods. The selection of these 3 directions relied not only on camera data, but also on realistic speeds for a vehicle leaving Greenville in low evening traffic. Ortiz ruled out routes leading back toward Wilmington, as no camera captured the car returning downtown, and excluded the direction toward Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, as the 17-minute window was insufficient to reach that area before signal loss. With a clear timeline established, Ortiz created a prioritized search map, starting with the corridor from the ATM camera to the SR-41 intersection, expanding outward to the Hockinson and Newark directions within 5 miles, and separately marking White Clay Creek due to its complex terrain. He used detailed maps to divide the area into search layers: Layer 1 paved, accessible roads, Layer 2 branching roads, and unregistered parking areas. Layer 3, areas a vehicle could turn into but difficult to spot from above, such as forest edges or dirt trails. The preliminary timeline also allowed Ortiz to assess urgency levels for each area, points near intersections prioritized for immediate recheck due to potential additional vehicle images. Next, forested roads with multiple stopping opportunities. Finally, regions without artificial lighting. He distributed the encoded search diagram with 3 priority levels to the night patrol teams and required immediate reporting of any sign matching Ethan's Porsche characteristics. Concluding the timeline process, Ortiz confirmed this was the most reliable chronology possible at this early stage, built solely on the objective data available. While the timeline did not yet answer why Ethan vanished, it pinpointed where he did not appear, where he definitely passed through, and most importantly, narrowed the search space from infinite to 3 specific directions, the 3 directions that would shape the entire subsequent investigation. Based on the preliminary timeline that had been established, Detective Ortiz moved to the step of verifying individuals directly connected to Ethan's schedule and relationships, with the most prominent being Mark Ellison, Lauren Bishop's ex-husband. The collection of background information on Mark was conducted prior to any direct contact. The separation record showed that the relationship between Mark and Lauren had lasted many years with numerous serious conflicts. Lauren had stated during the separation proceedings that Mark had a tendency to be controlling, would show up unannounced at her workplace, and attempted to monitor her new relationships after they separated. Mark's background check revealed no criminal record, but there were several civil reports related to disruptive behavior during the marriage period. These details did not constitute incriminating elements, but helped clarify a behavioral pattern that could be relevant to the disappearance. After completing the background review, Ortiz proactively approached Mark the following morning at his residence in the area near Pennsylvania Avenue. The interview process began by asking Mark to recount his schedule on the evening Ethan disappeared. Mark stated that he was home alone, working on his computer, and only went out briefly to pick up mail. He claimed he had no contact with Lauren that evening and had no knowledge of where Ethan went. Ortiz recorded the entire statement while also asking Mark to specify more precise time frames for each activity, but Mark could only provide vague time ranges lacking detail. When cross-referencing the statement with the established timeline milestones, Ortiz identified several issues. Mark could not name anyone who could corroborate that he was at home. The timing of picking up mail did not match delivery data. And most importantly, Mark's claim that he never left the property completely contradicted traffic camera data on SR-41, which had captured a vehicle matching the shape of his car moving within the time frame close to 10 p.m., although it could not yet be concluded that the vehicle in the camera was Mark's. This inconsistency was sufficient to classify his statement in the category of requiring deeper cross-verification. Ortiz continued questioning Mark about his relationship with Lauren, the extent of contact between Mark and Ethan, and whether Mark knew if Lauren had plans to meet Ethan that evening. Mark denied any involvement, but Ortiz noted evasive behaviors when specific times and the nature of the ongoing separation were mentioned. No single element could be considered clear evidence, but the lack of consistency in his statement, combined with the sensitive relational context between Mark and Lauren, led Ortiz to assess Mark as a potential subject requiring monitoring. He added Mark's name to the POI list in the internal report, with a note that details related to Mark's schedule on the night Ethan disappeared needed independent verification through objective data, particularly cameras, phone signals, and peripheral evidence. Although there was not yet sufficient basis to regard Mark as a suspect, the degree of coincidence between his personal context and the timing of Ethan's disappearance made surveillance and continued investigation of Mark a priority direction in the next steps. After adding Mark Ellison to the POI list and recognizing that further progress could not be made solely through camera data and statements, Detective Ortiz shifted focus to launching a large-scale field search operation based on the preliminary timeline. The objective was to sweep all 3 plausible travel directions, White Clay Creek Preserve, Hoccasin Forest, and the stretch along Brandywine Creek areas with complex terrain and high potential for concealing a vehicle. During an emergency meeting with the patrol unit commander, Ortiz proposed activating a coordinated search team, including police forces, K-9 units specialized in tracking missing persons, and Newcastle County's aerial observation team. The plan was structured in layers. The helicopter was responsible for scanning open roads and forest edges using infrared cameras. K-9 units handled tracking any residual scent along trails. Ground police teams were divided by geographic clusters to survey each possible turnoff segment. The first location checked was White Clay Creek Preserve, a large wooded area with many unmapped trails. The terrain there included numerous gentle slopes, rock crevices, and forest turnoffs, where a vehicle could enter and remain undetected for hours. K-9 teams were deployed at 3 starting points corresponding to the 3 major trails, while ground forces expanded the search in a circular pattern, sweeping each sector for tire marks, disturbed soil, or any unnatural objects. The helicopter circled overhead, recording the entire area with infrared cameras, but detected no heat signatures matching the size of a vehicle or signs of a person. When White Clay yielded no results, Ortiz redirected the team to Hockason Forest, where the terrain featured hilly slopes and uneven dirt roads likely to retain drag marks or wheel impressions. Each road segment was slowly scanned by patrol vehicles. Ground teams walked along slopes looking for long skid marks, impacts, or soil subsidence, all common indicators when a vehicle veers off the main road. However, no segment showed noteworthy physical signs. The group then moved to the Brandywine Creek area, focusing on steep riverbank points leading directly from the road down to the stream. This area had a history of multiple vehicle accidents in the 1990s and was classified as high risk. Rescue divers waded into deep water sections capable of concealing a vehicle, while the observation team checked every bend of the creek for reflective metal signs or tire impressions on gravel bars. Once again, all results were negative. Throughout the hours-long search process, Ortiz closely followed each team's reports, continuously updating the search map to avoid duplication and ensure all priority points were thoroughly covered. Police teams also checked locations where a vehicle might have stalked, such as abandoned lots, dead-end roads, unregistered parking areas, and sites commonly used for vehicle abandonment. Despite being expanded to the maximum, the entire 5-mile radius along the Porsche's direction of travel showed no indication that the vehicle had turned off the main road or stopped at any location. After compiling reports from the K-9 team, ground teams, and helicopter unit, Ortiz reached a conclusion for the first phase of the field search: no physical traces. No evidence related to Ethan or his vehicle across the entire priority area. This finding did not rule out foul play, but demonstrated that if the Porsche had left Greenville according to the timeline, it had not been abandoned within the initial search radius, forcing the investigation to rely on other data sources rather than expecting leads from the scene. When the field search yielded no useful traces, Detective Ortiz turned to behavioral analysis to determine whether the disappearance could have stemmed from voluntary intent to leave. This was a critical evaluation step to rule out non-criminal scenarios and avoid pursuing misguided investigative directions. Ortiz began by collecting Ethan's financial data for the 72 hours prior to his disappearance. Bank transaction history showed no cash withdrawals, no unusual transactions, and no expenditures consistent with preparing for a long trip, such as large fuel purchases, public transportation tickets, or payments at distant toll booths. Credit card records reflected a completely normal sequence of activity: a small transaction at a convenience store near Kennett Pike in the afternoon, with no further activity afterward. Ortiz continued by examining Ethan's email activity on the day he disappeared. The inbox showed no messages related to plans to leave the city, no unusual work exchanges, no resignation notices, and no emails to friends or family with farewell content or hints of temporarily leaving Delaware. Ethan even had an unsent draft email regarding a scheduled meeting for the upcoming weekend, a detail indicating he was still in the mindset of planning for the future, with no sign of wanting to pause or disappear. Ortiz expanded the analysis by reviewing Ethan's habits. Lauren provided information that Ethan always maintained a stable routine, rarely changed plans abruptly, and had never shown any desire to leave his job or cut contact with acquaintances. Ethan's colleagues also confirmed that he had attended the regular Monday morning meeting and made no mention of feeling pressured or wanting extended time off. Financially, Ethan had no high-risk debt and no unusual transactions suggesting preparation to liquidate assets or transfer money before vanishing. When cross-referencing all these factors, Ortiz began comparing Ethan's behavior to standard voluntary disappearance patterns from 2004 investigative guidelines. According to operational documents, adults who leave voluntarily typically exhibit one or more of the following signs: withdrawing small amounts of cash to avoid tracking, purchasing train bus tickets or booking hotels, freezing work activities or suddenly reporting absence, cleaning up or organizing the home, sending messages expressing a desire to detach from the current environment, or gradually cutting contact before disappearing. Ethan exhibited none of these signs. All collected data showed he continued his normal life right up until leaving home that evening. No abnormal psychological changes, no preparatory behavior, no motive to leave. The fact that he vanished abruptly right in the middle of a planned meeting with Lauren made the voluntary departure pattern even less plausible, as individuals intending to leave typically do not maintain social appointments close to the time of departure. Ortiz prepared a behavioral assessment report, concluding that the likelihood of Ethan voluntarily leaving Greenville was extremely low. If he had truly wanted to go away, he had personal means, stable finances, and no external constraints. There was no reason he would need to disappear in such a high-risk manner. More importantly, his phone lost signal just 17 minutes after leaving home, aligning with the initial travel phase in the timeline. In voluntary departure cases, victims' phones are rarely turned off immediately, but typically lose contact only after sufficient time to reach a safe location or an out-of-coverage area. This reinforced the assessment that Ethan's decision to power off his phone was not voluntary. Additionally, Ortiz analyzed Ethan's personal life circumstances, stable finances, a progressing relationship with Lauren, no internal conflicts, and no reports of Ethan showing signs of instability or excessive stress recently. No data provided a foundation for a motive to suddenly disappear. When synthesizing all behavioral factors, Ortiz reached a firm conclusion. The case did not fit any recorded voluntary disappearance pattern in investigative literature. The behavioral analysis report was added to the main file with a conclusion. The possibility of the victim leaving voluntarily is not credible. The current situation is consistent with an anomalous scenario or external intervention. This was a pivotal shift in the investigative assessment, reshaping the approach when all objective data indicated Ethan had no reason to actively disappear from his life. Having ruled out voluntary departure through behavioral evaluation, Detective Ortiz returned to the most prominent detail in the days leading up to Ethan's disappearance: the burglary that occurred 4 days earlier at this very residence. The incident record on file with Newcastle County PD showed that Ethan had reported an unauthorized entry with unclear purpose. The back door was opened, but the lock was undamaged. The home office was ransacked. Multiple drawers were pulled out, documents and personal papers scattered on the floor, yet no valuable items were taken. Ortiz went to the archives to review the original report and crime scene photos taken by the initial responding unit. The photos showed the search focused on the desk and filing shelves, with no signs of heavy impact or property destruction. A laptop remained on the desk, its screen undamaged and not taken an especially significant point because typical burglars prioritize electronics. Small valuable items such as watches, binoculars, or cameras were untouched. This led Ortiz to conclude that the purpose of the break-in was not theft. He further reviewed the describing officer's notes. No indication anyone stayed long in the house. No unfamiliar shoe prints. No items showed signs of being forced. The initial investigator had assessed the incident as a search for something specific, not burglary. Ortiz created a motive analysis table based on operational guidelines. This type of entry often appears in cases involving stalking, intimidation, or information gathering, especially when no property is taken. The perpetrator may have been seeking papers, personal documents, or information related to relationships, finances, or schedules items not convertible to material value, but important to someone with a personal motive. When cross-referencing this pattern with behavioral data collected from Lauren and the separation file, Mark Ellison emerged as the only individual matching this behavioral type. During the separation process, Lauren had to change locks due to suspicion that Mark had entered the house covertly. She reported multiple instances of Mark scrutinizing her new relationships and frequently appearing when she was with someone else. Although Lauren had no concrete evidence of Mark following her, civil records documented 2 disruptive incidents where Mark was warned for showing up inappropriately at her workplace. Ortiz placed Ethan's break-in in this context. The possibility that someone wanted to know about Ethan's personal life, especially as he began a relationship with Lauren, was entirely plausible. He rechecked items in Ethan's home office. Though the scene had been cleaned up, Lauren recalled Ethan complaining that someone had searched through documents related to his work schedule and appointments that week. This aligned with the objective of someone driven by jealousy or seeking information about Ethan's habits. Ortiz continued analyzing the timing logic. The break-in occurred exactly 4 days before Ethan's disappearance, close enough to serve as a preparatory or reconnaissance action before a larger event. The act of searching for information without taking property indicated focus on the victim rather than gain. An ordinary burglar would not overlook high-value electronics, especially in the home of someone living alone. Apart from Mark, no one else in Ethan's circle had the capacity or motive for this type of behavior. No one else had a reason to monitor Ethan or take interest in his life to a disruptive degree. If the break-in was unrelated to the disappearance, it would require a different pattern, but no data supported that. When referencing Mark's file and the events between him and Lauren prior to separation, Ortiz noted similarities between Mark's alleged behavior and the break-in pattern at Ethan's home. Entry without theft, rummaging through personal items, searching documents, and close temporal proximity to the main incident. Ortiz's pre-event assessment report concluded that the break-in was highly unlikely to be an isolated event. Although it could not yet be proven with clear physical evidence, the nature and objective of the entry required it to be viewed as a link in a deliberate behavioral context, and as one of the key details shaping the investigative direction when Ethan's disappearance showed many signs inconsistent with any voluntary departure pattern. After completing the analysis of the break-in 4 days prior and reviewing all facts surrounding Ethan's disappearance, Detective Ortiz conducted a comprehensive evaluation to determine the next investigative direction, but the available data sources quickly revealed their limitations. The preliminary timeline had established the direction of travel and signal loss time, but no camera captured the license plate or driver of the Porsche after the ATM point, leaving the vehicle's route from 9:52 p.m. to after 10 p.m. completely blank. Phone data only indicated when the device was powered off, not the final location. Ethan's financial activity provided no clues about where he might have gone. Search teams had covered the entire priority area within a 5-mile radius, but found no vehicle traces or any related evidence. No additional witnesses came forward to provide information about Ethan's appearance that night, and no one reported seeing the Porsche in nearby areas after the last recorded footage. Meanwhile, Mark Ellison, although listed as a POI, still lacked any objective data directly linking him to wherever Ethan may have gone. When Ortiz reviewed Mark's full statement, the inconsistencies in time and schedule presentation were noteworthy but not yet evidence. No camera or phone data proved Mark left home at a time matching Ethan's timeline. Civil records showed Mark's controlling behavior toward Lauren, but this background information was difficult to use as grounds for a search warrant in the absence of physical evidence or statements confirming Mark's contact with Ethan on the night of the Jew disappearance. In particular, to obtain a search warrant under 2004 legal standards, Ortiz needed to demonstrate probable cause, a reasonable likelihood that evidence related to the case existed inside the premises to be searched. However, no data, camera footage, or witness testimony proved Mark had contacted Ethan, left home at the suspected time, or possessed any of Ethan's property. This made obtaining a warrant to search Mark's home or vehicle impossible. Ortiz re-examined each data group once more. The prior break-in had a suspicious pattern, but lacked clear evidence. Lauren's statement was helpful, but only provided relational background. Ethan's timeline established direction, but not an endpoint. Field searches returned negative. No new witnesses had emerged since the missing person report. Even the behavioral analyses pointed toward the absence of voluntary departure factors, but they offered no new investigative leads when no subject or event could be verified at an evidentiary level. In the comprehensive report submitted to command, Ortiz concluded that the case was lacking a critical element: no scene traces, no vehicle, no incriminating physical evidence, no new community leads, and insufficient probable cause to expand investigative measures against Mark Ellison or any other individual. With limited resources and all prior investigative avenues exhausted within allowable scope but yielding no results, Ortiz recommended suspending active investigation and shifting the case to passive monitoring status, keeping the file open but deploying no further resource-intensive measures until new information emerged. The final report stated clearly, no objective evidence, no probable cause to proceed with further steps. Recommend maintaining file pending additional information. This was the point where all investigative efforts from the day Ethan disappeared converged to complete dead end, where the pieces of data appeared insufficient to advance further despite the case still bearing clear signs of anomaly. When all investigative leads reached a point where no further progress was possible and no new elements emerged for several weeks afterward, Detective Ortiz was forced to proceed to the next step in accordance with New Castle County Police Department protocol: consider classifying the case as a cold case. In early 2005, 3 months after Ethan Merrick was reported missing, Ortiz presented the compiled case file to the Internal Review Board, the body responsible for evaluating cases that no longer appeared capable of advancement at the present time. The formal process began with compiling a comprehensive inventory of all existing data, including the initial scene report, time of disappearance, field search results, peripheral camera data, behavioral analysis, statements from Lauren Bishop and Mark Ellison, and detailed reports on vehicle canvassing efforts that yielded no results. The review board required Ortiz to clearly list the unresolved points deemed significant for determining the nature of the case. This inventory consisted of 4 main items. First, the Porsche, and any physical traces related to the vehicle's movement after the ATM camera footage had not been located. Second, no witnesses had seen Ethan or the Porsche after 9:52 p.m. Third, Mark Ellison's statement, while containing inconsistencies, could not be objectively corroborated or disproven with data to establish direct involvement. Fourth, the burglary 4 days earlier had an unusual modus operandi but left no physical evidence of sufficient legal value to use as part of an argument identifying a suspect. These points were flagged as unexplainable with currently available data, meaning that, without new events or new evidence, continued investigation would not produce a breakthrough. After the board confirmed that the case had reached the limit of the active investigation phase, the file was transferred to cold case protocol as required at the time. All documents had to be inventoried, duplicated, coded, and stored in the special record system designated for cases showing signs of criminality but lacking sufficient legal grounds to proceed further. Ortiz worked with the unit's legal clerk to organize each group of documents according to archiving standards. Group 1 included incident reports and scene data. Group 2 included electronic data such as call logs, camera images, and interim reports. Group 3 included statements and interview transcripts. Group 4 included search maps, primary timelines, and all behavioral analysis results. Each group was assigned a unique code, table of contents, annotations, and supplemental documents to ensure that any future investigator accessing the file would clearly understand the process that had occurred and the limitations of the data at the time. Once all data had been standardized, Ethan Merrick's case file was officially entered into the Delaware Cold Case Unit, a small unit that primarily maintains unsolved cases by waiting for changes in witnesses, technology, or peripheral data. The file entry process also required an assessment of the case's priority level within the cold case inventory. Based on the nature of the case disappearance with unusual elements, missing vehicle, victim schedule inconsistent with a voluntary departure pattern, the case was ranked as medium priority, meaning it would not be forgotten, but also would not be placed in the group, subject to regular review due to the lack of a legal foundation to expand the investigation in any specific direction. Ortiz completed the closure report for the active investigation phase, explicitly stating that while criminal elements were possible, there was no probable cause against any individual, nor evidence to establish the victim's final location or that of the vehicle. The report was signed off by the investigative unit commander, and from that point, the case status changed from active investigation to inactive, cold status, meaning no dedicated investigative team remained assigned, and no additional efforts would be undertaken unless new information emerged. When the file was transferred to cold case storage, Ortiz conducted one final review of the detailed event narrative, ensuring all information was fully documented for potential reactivation should circumstances change in the future. Upon completion of the process, all reports and physical evidence were placed in a standard case box, sealed, coded, and added to the 2005 cold case inventory. From that point forward, the disappearance of Ethan Merrick officially ceased active investigation and became one of hundreds of files awaiting time or opportunity to provide a new piece of the puzzle. Nearly 15 years after Ethan Merrick's missing person file was placed in the cold case unit, a completely unexpected development occurred at White Clay Creek Preserve, an area that had previously been within the search radius but yielded no results. In April 2019, a Delaware State Environmental Survey team conducting geological checks in a rarely visited steep hillside area in preparation for a soil erosion assessment project cleared fallen trees and accumulated sediment. During the process, a team member spotted a curved metal section protruding beneath decayed leaves. Digging a few inches deeper revealed it was part of an old vehicle's body, almost completely covered by soil and tree roots. Recognizing signs of long-term burial, the team immediately reported to the Department of Forestry, after which Newcastle County Police Department took over the scene. When investigators arrived, the vehicle was almost entirely buried, with only a few corroded steel panels exposed, positioned diagonally along the downslope slide, nose pointing toward the dry creek bed. Initial examination determined the vehicle had not rolled down naturally, no signs of emergency braking, no long skid marks on the ground. Instead, the pattern indicated an object deliberately pushed from the trail down the low-angle slope. Rescue personnel used lifting equipment to fully expose the chassis and identify the original make and model. Despite years and environmental damage destroying most of the exterior, the frame structure and certain details remained identifiable. The vehicle sample was cross-checked against regional missing vehicle records, and within hours a match was confirmed. The Porsche 944 owned by Ethan Merrick, the vehicle that had never been located since 2004. Upon opening the car doors, investigators discovered human remains inside the cabin, largely disarticulated due to the passage of time. There were no signs of large animal intrusion, indicating the vehicle had remained in a near-intact state for many years, covered by a natural layer of soil, leaves, and roots that had prevented earlier search efforts from reaching it. The forensic team collected the remains on the same day, sorting them by skeletal structure and sending them for identification via dental record comparison. Within 48 hours, the conclusion was reached. The remains belonged to Ethan Merrick. With this discovery, the 2004 missing person case was immediately reclassified as a suspicious death investigation. Newcastle County Police Department notified the cold case unit, which had been managing Ethan's file, and requested reactivation of all related documents. The main file was promptly reactivated and changed to reopened active review status. Original documents, maps, and investigative reports from 2004-2005 were retrieved from storage for recomparison with the new scene data. The discovery of the Porsche and the remains inside not only ended the 15-year missing status, but fundamentally altered the nature of the case, as the vehicle's location, the deformed frame shape, and the terrain where it was found all reinforced indications of external intervention rather than a natural accident. This was the first time since 2004 that a sufficiently strong physical lead had emerged to reactivate the entire investigative process, opening new avenues after years of deadlock. After confirming the identity of the remains and handing over the scene, the next step in the 2019 reopened investigation was to conduct a comprehensive forensic analysis of the Porsche found in White Clay Creek Preserve. Although the vehicle had suffered severe damage after nearly 15 years buried under soil and leaf litter, several mechanical and electronic components remained viable for examination. Most critically, the ECU, Electronic Control Unit. Delaware State Police technical team transported the entire chassis to the lab, disassembled intact components, and recovered data from the ECU using specialized reading equipment for older vehicles. Although much of the data was corrupted due to oxidation, a final segment of information was successfully extracted: the speed log and engine activity in the minutes before the vehicle ceased operation. Compared against Porsche 944 standards, the data showed a gradual speed reduction over distance from approximately 38 miles per hour down to under 15 miles per hour in the final phase, indicating the vehicle did not suffer an engine failure but was deliberately slowed. The log also recorded gradual throttle release rather than abrupt cutoff, as seen in accidents or loss of control scenarios, a signal that the vehicle was not traveling when it went off the slope but had nearly stopped before sliding or being pushed. Analysis of the ECU travelogue also allowed estimation of the additional distance the vehicle traveled after the last camera capture in 2004. Based on the speed and time data, specialists determined the distance matched the route from SR 41 to the edge of White Clay Creek Preserve, consistent with the direction predicted in the original timeline but unverifiable at the time. In parallel with ECU analysis, the forensic team conducted soil analysis examining soil samples adhering to the undercarriage, wheel wells, and metal creches. Soil samples were separated into groups based on compaction level, color, mineral content, and organic impurities. When cross-referenced with the Wilmington Hockenson white clay soil maps, experts identified three distinct soil types: sandy clay from SR 41, humus-rich forest soil from the preserve trail edge, and especially the characteristic slope soil from the recovery location. The layered adhesion of these three soil types showed the vehicle had traveled through the exact sequence of adjacent environments into the preserve, then stopped at the scene location without signs of being towed from elsewhere. This ruled out scenarios of the vehicle being transported by another means or placed there at a different time from Ethan's disappearance. Next, the forensic team examined the damage pattern, the deformation pattern of the chassis, to determine the mechanism of the downslope movement. Damage to the front bumper and undercarriage showed no high-speed impact. There were no frontal collision dents, nor signs of body rotation from loss of control. Longitudinal scratches along the undercarriage and door gaps indicated slow movement at a low angle, consistent with being pushed or slid from a stationary position. Additionally, there were no signs of airbag deployment, further supporting that the vehicle was not running when it left the road. This directly contradicted the accident hypothesis. Had the driver lost control, there would have been long skid marks on the soil or chaotic braking evidence on the upper trail. Yet the pristine soil surface on the trail showed no such emergency braking or sudden directional change. Ultimately, combining all forensic results, ECU data, soil analysis, and damage pattern. The examination team concluded that the Porsche did not go down the slope randomly, but was brought to the trail edge in a stop state, then deliberately pushed down the slope to conceal it. The consistency across travel distance, sequential soil layering, and damage pattern was incompatible with any accident scenario and matched only intentional vehicle movement by another party. The forensic report was submitted to the cold case unit, confirming that the 2004 incident involved deliberate intervention, not an accident or voluntary disappearance, and that the Porsche had been intentionally hidden on the night of the event, reinforcing the presumption that Ethan Merrick did not leave voluntarily and that his death involved direct criminal elements. Once the forensic analysis of the Porsche clearly established intentional concealment of the vehicle, the cold case unit shifted to re-exploiting 2004 imaging data using technology that did not exist at the time. The ATM footage from Kennett Pike, previously deemed too blurry for use, was processed through the Delaware State Police Digital Lab's AI reconstruction system, capable of enhancing resolution via machine learning and reconstructing motion from low-quality, noisy data. The process took several weeks, progressively increasing resolution, removing noise, and reconstructing each frame, with particular focus on edge areas where older cameras typically degraded. Upon analyzing the enhanced video, the technical team observed that besides Ethan's Porsche appearing at 9:52 p.m., there was also light and motion from another vehicle visible behind it, approximately 40 to 60 meters back. In 2004, this had been noted only as unidentified vehicle lights, but with AI reconstruction, the light shape, headlight height, road reflection pattern, and spacing between light strips were reconstructed with greater clarity. When matched against vehicles registered to Mark Ellison at the time, the similarity in taillight shape and vehicle frame dimensions was very high, sufficient to conclude that the trailing vehicle was very likely the sedan Mark used. The cold case unit then requested enhancement of the SR41 intersection camera footage, which had previously captured faint lights from two vehicles seconds apart near 10 p.m. The enhanced data showed a sequence of movement consistent with the direction and speed extracted from the Porsche's ECU, meaning the two vehicles not only appeared on the same route, but moved consecutively in the same direction within a short time window. Combining the two video segments from the ATM in the intersection, the analysis team created a relative positioning map of the two vehicles, using Greenville topographic models to calculate distances and timings at each capture point. The simulation results showed that if the Porsche left the ATM at 9:52 p.m. and followed the ECU recorded speeds, the trailing vehicle matching Mark's car characteristics must have departed from an area near Lauren's residence or a connecting side road off Pennsylvania Avenue shortly before. This ruled out random coincidence on the same route and significantly increased the probability that the two vehicles were engaged in a continuous movement sequence. This was the first time since 2004 that physical evidence, albeit indirect but highly technical, demonstrated a vehicle associated with Mark Ellison appearing on the same route as Ethan on the very night he disappeared. Previously, Mark's statement that he was home all evening could neither be verified nor disproven due to lack of camera coverage of his vehicle movement. However, with the enhanced video data, investigators now possessed a clearer image sequence proving the presence of a vehicle matching Mark's in the same time frame and space as the Porsche moved before vanishing from all cameras. The cold case unit immediately noted this discovery in the file as a significant new level evidentiary item, as it created the first physical link between Ethan and Mark on the night of the incident, a connection never established in any prior investigative phase. Although the video was insufficient to identify a license plate or driver, the simultaneous presence of the two vehicles, proven by modern image restoration technology, significantly altered the case's data structure, shifting Mark from a person of interest based on behavior and relationship to an individual with direct linkage to the victim's final travel route. Based on the reconstructed route map, investigators confirmed the two vehicles had moved in a consistent sequence through at least two capture points, and if that trajectory continued, both would have proceeded directly toward the wooded area where the Porsche was found 15 years later. With this discovery, the main investigative file now had a new linked technical evidence connecting to behavioral data, an element the case had lacked from 2004 until now, after AI reconstruction technology provided the first evidence suggesting Mark's vehicle likely appeared directly behind Ethan's Porsche on the night of the disappearance. The cold case unit expanded its scope to reprocess digital data, focusing on electronic files previously deemed unusable in 2004 due to technical limitations. The initial step was recovery of old emails from the account Mark used during the separation period, which contained many deleted messages before investigators could collect them. With assistance from the FBI Digital Forensics Lab, technicians retrieved residual metadata copies from the service provider's servers. Several emails Mark deleted in December 2004 were recovered in raw form, including messages discussing adjustments to his statement and exchanges about his timeline on the exact night Ethan disappeared. Metadata showed some emails were drafted around 10:20 p.m., just minutes after Ethan's phone completely lost signal, directly contradicting Mark's prior claim that he went to bed early and did not use the computer that evening. Analysts further extracted information on IP addresses, login times, and access devices, confirming Mark had used his personal computer at home during the exact hours he claimed to have remained in the bedroom. The discrepancy between digital data and his statement provided clear indication of intentional provision of false information. In parallel, the cold case unit requested recovery of voicemails related to Mark and Lauren during the week of Ethan's disappearance. In 2004, most answering machine recordings were stored on low-quality tapes that could not be clearly analyzed. However, with modern audio processing technology, the lab was able to reduce noise, enhance speech, and recover segments previously considered unintelligible. One notable voicemail was a message Mark left for Lauren the evening before Ethan disappeared. While the content was not overtly threatening, call metadata showed Mark contacted Lauren multiple times consecutively between 18:00 p.m. and 9:30 p.m., aligning precisely with the time frame when cameras captured the suspected vehicle associated with Mark on the road. Another voicemail left the following morning revealed Mark attempting to reconstruct a previous night's timeline in an unusual manner. He mentioned minute details as though emphasizing specific time markers without being prompted, a pattern often seen in efforts to establish an alibi preemptively. The cold case unit incorporated all recovered emails and voicemails into a comparison chart against the original event timeline. When metadata timestamps were placed alongside Ethan's movement timeline, the analysis team identified suspicious overlaps. The times of Mark's computer activity, voicemail deposits, and camera-captured vehicle lights aligned in a non-random manner. Notably, the email drafted at 10:20 p.m. showed Mark was alert and active during the time frame he previously claimed to have stayed home, not left, and used no devices. His subsequent deletion of the emails heightened suspicion and clearly indicated an attempt to conceal electronic activity. Analysis of the intent behind the deleted emails revealed Mark adjusting his schedule descriptions to align with a self-favorable version of behavior commonly associated with attempts to craft a consistent narrative ahead of re-interview. Meanwhile, voicemail metadata estimated the calling device's location near Pennsylvania Avenue, contradicting the claim that Mark never left home that evening. The differences between digital data and statements were not mere minor inconsistencies. They represented a consistent behavioral pattern. Mark provided false information, deliberately erased electronic traces, and self-edited his timeline. When combining the recovered email, voicemail, and camera data with a forensic timeline, the cold case unit for the first time achieved linkage across three evidence groups: the suspect vehicle, Mark's digital activity on the night of the incident, and the time sequence aligning with Ethan's disappearance. From this analysis, the report concluded unequivocally that Mark had intentionally concealed his actions on the night Ethan disappeared, a pivotal factor that completely shifted the investigative weight and positioned him as an individual with direct relevance in the chain of case facts. When the recovered digital data showed that Mark Ellison deliberately concealed his activities on the night Ethan disappeared, the cold case unit continued to issue public appeals to the community in search of new witnesses, particularly those who lived or worked near Greenville and White Clay during the 2004 period. Just a few weeks later, 3 independent sources came forward, each statement filling in a remaining gap in the forensic timeline and reinforcing previous technical conclusions. The first witness was a former colleague of Mark's at the consulting firm where he worked in 2004. This person stated that approximately 2 days after Ethan was reported missing, Mark approached him during lunchtime and tried to recount the entire schedule of that evening in unusual detail, even though no one had asked. Notably, Mark also asked the colleague to help remember that he had been home all evening, citing the reason that the police might ask about it. The colleague found the request strange at the time, but did not dwell on it, as Mark spoke in a tense tone and repeatedly emphasized that everything needed to be consistent. This testimony fully aligned with the recovered email metadata, in which Mark edited descriptions of his behavior that night before being questioned, demonstrating an active early effort to establish an alibi. The second witness lived near the edge of White Clay Creek Preserve and was someone who regularly walked their dog in the evenings. During their interview with the cold case unit, he stated that on one late winter night in 2004, close to the date of Ethan's disappearance, he saw the headlights of a dark-colored sports car at a spot near the turnoff leading down the slope. He remembered it clearly because the area was very quiet at that time, and the engine sound carried differently from the SUVs or pickup trucks common in the region. It resembled a high-performance engine. Although he could not identify the license plate or the driver, the location and timing he described matched perfectly with the direction of travel derived from the Porsche's ECU log. This information was especially significant because it supported the forensic determination that the car had been present at the trail's edge before being pushed down the slope, while also confirming that local residents had seen a vehicle matching the description at that time. The third witness was Mark's former neighbor in the residential area near Pennsylvania Avenue. When asked about events in 2004, she recalled a detail she had not considered important at the time. On the exact night Ethan disappeared, Mark left home later than usual. She saw him pull out of the driveway around 9:30 p.m., a time that directly contradicted Mark's statement that he did not leave the house after dinner. She also remembered that Mark returned very late, with his headlights shining into her yard and waking her up. This testimony was assessed as highly reliable because she clearly identified the discomfort caused by the headlights shining into her window, a sensory detail that is typically difficult to fabricate or misremember over time. When placed together, these three statements formed a mutually corroborating chain that directly supported the forensic timeline built from technical data. The colleague confirmed Mark's intentional attempt to create an alibi immediately after the event. The White Clay witness confirmed the presence of a sports car at the location near where the Porsche was found. The neighbor confirmed Mark left home at the exact time frame that matched the ATM camera footage of the suspect vehicle. When the cold case unit incorporated the three statements into the analysis chart, the alignments became clear. If Mark left home around 9:30 p.m., he could easily have reached the area near Ethan's house at the time the Porsche left its driveway. If a sports car was seen at the edge of White Clay that night, it matched the travel direction extracted from the ECU. And if Mark attempted to build an alibi right after Ethan went missing, it reinforced the conclusion that he anticipated investigative scrutiny would turn toward him. Notably, all three statements aligned with the forensic conclusion that the Porsche had been deliberately driven to the location where it was found and did not go down the slope in an accident. When compiled into the case file, the cold case unit designated all three as high-value witnesses, as they not only supplied missing links but also established the human element alongside the technical evidence. For the first time, witness data and forensic evidence unified into a seamless sequence of events, moving Mark Ellison from a person of interest based on personal relationships to someone whose presence was independently corroborated by witness statements at key moments in the case. With a full set of data gathered from forensics, AI reconstruction, new witness statements, and other technical records, the cold case unit launched a critical task: reconstructing the complete minute-by-minute forensic timeline of the night Ethan Merrick disappeared in order to precisely determine the intersection points of movement between Ethan and Mark Ellison. The first data table came from the recovered ECU log, showing speed, throttle reduction points, and travel times after leaving the ATM at 9:52 p.m. When combined with estimated distances, gradual speed reduction, and topographic maps, the technical team determined that the Porsche entered the edge of White Clay Creek Preserve between 9:58 and 10:02 p.m., coinciding exactly with the time Ethan's phone lost signal. Soil analysis confirmed this route, as samples taken from the undercarriage showed a sequential passage through exactly three areas: SR 41 Road, the trail leading into the preserve, and finally the distinctive soil layer at the discovery location. In parallel, cell tower logs re-examined using 2019 technology for higher accuracy showed Ethan's phone pinging through the tower covering western Greenville at 9:50 p.m., then losing signal entirely just minutes after the device moved out of primary coverage. This data matched the ECU-derived route perfectly, solidly confirming the path the Porsche traveled in those final minutes. When the AI-recovered camera footage was added to the timeline table, two video sequences, ATM on Kennett Pike and the SR 41 intersection, both captured a vehicle with characteristics matching Mark Ellison's car directly behind the Porsche, separated by only a few seconds to a few dozen seconds depending on the frame. This gap indicated the two vehicles maintained a similar travel trajectory without drifting too far apart, and Mark's headlights continued to appear in the time immediately following the Porsche's exit from frame. When constructing the minute-by-minute timeline from 9:40 to 10:05 p.m., the final period before all of Ethan's signals vanished, the cold case unit observed a very clear sequence of events. 9:45 Porsche leaves driveway. 9:50 Ethan's phone pings Western Tower. 9:52 Porsche appears on ATM camera. 9:53 suspect vehicle, Marks, appears behind in recovered video. 9:58 intersection camera records two matching light streams in sequence. 10:10 to wide ZU log records deceleration and stop at preserve edge. 10:10 Ethan's phone loses signal. When the new witness statements were added to the timeline, 3 additional independent corroboration points emerged. Mark's neighbor confirmed he left home around 9:30 p.m. The white clay witness recalled seeing the sports car during the exact window the ECU log showed the Porsche stopping. Mark's colleague confirmed he attempted to build an alibi the very next day, consistent with his presence at key points that night. To strengthen accuracy, the investigative team created a dynamic map model, allowing simulation of each vehicle's position minute by minute based on average speeds extracted from the ECU, actual distances between camera points, headlight appearance times on video, and cell tower data. The simulation results showed Ethan's and Mark's paths overlapping at multiple segments, not just one, and particularly that both entered the White Clay Creek area during the same final time window, before the Porsche disappeared from all records. More importantly, the analysis team's exclusion algorithm determined that no third vehicle matched the recorded light patterns on camera, meaning the vehicle behind the Porsche was almost certainly Mark's. From all consolidated sources, ECU, soil analysis, AI video, cell tower, witnesses, the cold case unit reached a pivotal investigative conclusion. Throughout the entire route Ethan traveled before disappearing, Mark Ellison was the only person present on the same journey, at the same times, in the same geographic locations, while also being the only one with motive, opportunity, and behavioral indicators of concealment consistent with the forensic findings. The data chain not only placed Mark at the scene indirectly, but established continuous matching traces, a critical condition for listing him as the sole suspect. The complete 2019 forensic timeline became the most important legal and technical foundation of the entire reinvestigation. Reconstructing the night, Ethan Merrick vanished minute by minute for the first time, and clearly identifying Mark's position at every critical time node. When the complete forensic timeline showed Mark Ellison as the only person appearing concurrently with Ethan throughout the final journey before the Porsche vanished, the cold case unit transferred the entire file to the Delaware Attorney General's office for prosecution review. ADA Caroline Mercer, who handled major cases involving technical evidence, reviewed all evidence against Delaware Code Title 11 standards. After several days of examining the data from ECU logs, soil analysis, AI video reconstruction, cell tower records to supplemental witness statements, Mercer concluded that the chain of circumstantial evidence had reached a strong, probable cause threshold, sufficient for an arrest warrant. Recovered electronic components from the vehicle, enhanced video proving Mark's continuous presence behind the Porsche, and testimony from the white clay witness and Mark's neighbor formed a unified, internally consistent evidence structure. Mercer obtained the arrest warrant from the Delaware Superior Court after presenting a summary of evidence to the duty judge, and the warrant was entered into the federal system since Mark had relocated to Philadelphia in 2012. Immediately afterward, DSP coordinated with U.S. Marshals and Philadelphia PD to execute the arrest at Mark's workplace, a technology consulting firm near Center City. The arrest occurred swiftly in the early morning as Mark had just left the underground parking garage. He was ordered out of his vehicle, informed of the warrant charging him in connection with Ethan Merrick's death, and handcuffed per standard procedure. Mark did not resist but repeatedly insisted he had told everything back in 2004, an attitude the arresting officers noted as unstable in their report. Immediately after the arrest, a search team executed a supplemental warrant obtained by Mercer at Mark's South Philadelphia residence. Forensic teams seized his personal computer, storage drives, several boxes of old documents from the period of his separation from Lauren, and his current cell phone for call log and communication pattern analysis. Notably, in the garage, investigators found several old vehicle repair items that were no longer intact, not sufficient for direct linkage, but still collected for examination. All items were sealed and transferred to Delaware for inclusion in the prosecution file. Concurrently, Ada Mercer prepared the indictment charging murder in the first degree, tampering with physical evidence, abuse of a corpse, and hindering prosecution. The charging document was built on three main evidence groups: forensic, digital/technical, and witness. Mercer placed particular emphasis on describing the continuous chain of linkage, a legal term referring to the combination of multiple pieces of circumstantial evidence forming an uninterrupted, explanatory thread. Under Delaware law, this combination was sufficient to present the case to the grand jury, which would make the final decision on prosecution. At the same time, the cold case unit lead investigator prepared background materials for the hearing process, including the minute-by-minute forensic timeline map, analysis of Mark's behavior over the years, and records of the 2004 break-in. Once all evidence was transferred to the prosecution division, the case officially moved from reopened investigation to active prosecution. Mark Ellison was returned to Delaware within 48 hours of arrest, appeared in court for the initial hearing to confirm identity, hear the charges read, and face a very high bail amount due to the nature of the case. With the arrest warrant executed, Mark's residence and devices searched, and the charging document completed to legal standards, the 15-year investigation into Ethan Merrick's case entered a new phase: criminal prosecution under Delaware state law. When the grand jury formally approved the indictment and the case proceeded to trial, Mark Ellison's trial became a focal point of the Delaware justice system due to the case's long duration and the unprecedented volume of technical evidence used in such an old, cold case. ADA Caroline Mercer opened her presentation by reconstructing the entire forensic evidence chain in a clear sequence: ECU data showing the Porsche stopped intentionally, soil analysis proving continuous travel through exactly 3 areas until the slope drop, damage pattern confirming the vehicle was pushed from a stationary position rather than crashing, and the forensic timeline map demonstrating alignment between vehicle movement data and the time Ethan's phone lost signal. Next, Mercer presented the AI reconstructed video to the jury, allowing them to directly observe sequences previously deemed unusable in 2004. In the enhanced ATM footage, the headlights and body dimensions of the vehicle behind the Porsche matched almost perfectly with the model Mark owned at the time. When the SR41 intersection video was shown, the light trajectories of the two vehicles demonstrated uninterrupted linkage, reinforcing the theory that Mark had closely followed Ethan on the route to White Clay Creek Preserve. To further strengthen the case, Mercer displayed a speed simulation chart based on ECU logs combined with terrain maps, allowing the jury to clearly see the moment the Porsche decelerated and stopped at the preserve edge. An event only a following vehicle, maintaining close proximity, could capture. After the forensic portion, Mercer moved to inconsistencies in Mark's statements across 2 periods: the 2004-2005 investigation and the 2019 reopening. She presented Mark's initial statements claiming he stayed home all evening, did not use the computer, did not leave the driveway, then contrasted them with email metadata proving he logged into his computer at 10:20 p.m., along with voicemail records placing the device call at Pennsylvania Avenue, directly contradicting his claim of never leaving home. Mercer continued by pointing out that Mark deleted numerous emails shortly after drafting them, an action only meaningful for concealment if the content could be incriminating. Behaviorally, Mercer showed the jury that Mark had edited his own timeline before police even suspected him, an action his former colleague confirmed in testimony. When witness testimony was called, all 3 appeared in court, each statement reinforcing one link in the chain. The colleague described Mark pressuring him to remember the schedule to create an alibi. The neighbor recounted Mark leaving at the exact time Ethan left his driveway and returning very late. The White Clay witness related seeing a dark sports car near where the Porsche was pushed down the slope. These statements matched each forensic segment, forming a unified evidence structure that Mercer emphasized as impossible to occur by coincidence across all 3 levels: technical, witness, and behavioral, unless the same person was present at the scene. The defense challenged each evidence group, starting with forensics. They argued that AI reconstructed video could not identify license plates or drivers, ECU data could not prove who was driving, and soil analysis did not rule out other transport methods to the scene. However, Mercer countered by presenting the complementary forensic results. No single data point stood alone, but together they painted the same route with unified timing, something the defense could not refute. Regarding witness testimony, the defense emphasized the long time lapse potentially causing memory errors. Yet Mercer pointed out that all three statements corroborated one another and aligned with modern technical data, an element that increased reliability. As courts have recognized in many cold case precedents, when the defense attempted to downplay the weight of email metadata and voicemail by arguing they do not prove criminal content, Mercer countered by stressing the legal value of concealment behavior. Deleting emails, editing timelines, calling from different locations, and changing statements all constituted hindering prosecution under Delaware Code. The trial's climax came when Mercer displayed the complete 2019 forensic timeline, consolidating all data into a single chronological line. The jury clearly saw that at every critical time, note Ethan leaving home, vehicle appearance on camera, phone signal loss, vehicle stop at preserve, only one person appeared continuously in the same space, Mark Ellison. The defense could not offer a plausible alternative scenario or identify any second individual present at the key points. With their rebuttals fragmented, they failed to break the overall logical structure the prosecution had constructed. When evidence presentation concluded, the jury had before them a seamless, complete, and consistent data chain, something the case had never achieved in nearly 2 decades prior, and the trial moved to deliberation. After several weeks of trial and nearly 3 days of deliberation, the jury entered the courtroom in absolute silence. The result was read immediately as requested by the presiding judge. The jury unanimously found that the forensic evidence chain, recovered digital data, witness testimony, and travel timeline met the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, sufficient to conclude Mark Ellison was directly responsible for Ethan Merrick's death. When the jury foreperson confirmed guilty on the murder in the first-degree charge, Mark stood motionless, face expressionless but hands clenching with a slight tremor. While the prosecution side remained composed, the judge proceeded with sentencing per Delaware Code Title 11 procedures, under which murder in the first degree carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment without parole. Based on proven factors, including concealing the victim's body in the vehicle to hide the truth, intentionally pushing the vehicle down the slope, and years-long efforts to cover up through data deletion, alibi construction, and false statements, the court determined no legitimate mitigating circumstances applied. In addition to the primary charge, the 2 supplementary charges of tampering with physical evidence and abuse of a corpse were also found to have sufficient basis, based on Mark's intentional handling of the scene by concealing the vehicle with Ethan's body and prolonging the investigation for nearly 2 decades. Additional penalties for these charges were imposed consecutively, but did not alter the primary sentence. Mark Ellison would serve life imprisonment without possibility of parole or commutation, per Delaware standards for premeditated murder involving concealment. After sentencing, the court ordered a comprehensive record compiled of all evidence used, including the forensic timeline, AI reconstructed video, soil analysis, ECU logs, metadata analysis, and witness statements. This is a requirement often applied to cases the justice system deems precedential for establishing standards on technology use in cold cases. The cold case unit also completed procedures to change the case status from active prosecution to closed adjudicated, while adding a post-investigation evaluation to the archive system, describing how modern technology played a decisive role in solving the case. These documents were stored with the original 2004 file, forming a complete historical chain spanning nearly 15 years. The Ethan Merrick case, once closed in 2005 for lack of evidence, was returned to Cold Case Unit archives as a textbook example of how investigative capabilities evolve with technology. From a blurry ATM camera becoming key evidence when restored, from a vehicle buried in woods becoming the center of forensic analysis, and from a suspect with only vague motive becoming the only person present along the victim's entire route on the night of the incident. The court declared the trial concluded. Mark Ellison was escorted from the courtroom and transferred directly to a state correctional facility, appropriate for life without parole. Ethan's family, those who waited nearly 2 decades for the truth, quietly left the courthouse carrying the verdict as final affirmation of what they had always believed. Ethan did not disappear by choice, but was the victim of deliberate action. When the case file was closed and marked complete, Cold Case Unit investigators noted that it would serve as reference material for forensic and digital investigation training courses, demonstrating that persistence combined with technological progress can solve mysteries long thought permanently buried by time. The story of the Ethan Merrick case, spanning nearly 2 decades and solved only through the combination of modern technology, sophisticated forensics, And the persistence of cold case unit personnel reflects a clear reality of contemporary American life. We live in a society heavily dependent on data, recording technology, and digital traceability. Key details of the case, such as the ATM camera footage thought useless in 2004 but becoming crucial when AI restored in 2019, or Mark Ellison's deleted email metadata that still left undeniable traces, remind us that in the modern world, human behavior almost always leaves a trail somewhere. This matters not only in criminal investigations but in personal life. Every choice, every online or offline action can become part of a larger story about oneself. The clearest lesson from the case is the importance of transparency and personal accountability. Mark Ellison once believed deleting emails, building alibis, or giving false statements would suffice to hide the truth. But as in many modern American cases, data and technology ultimately exposed what was deliberately concealed. In today's life, this reminds us that truth tends to endure longer than efforts to evade it, and that acting with integrity, respecting boundaries, not controlling others, and not using technology to harm others are fundamental principles for building safe communities. The story also underscores the importance of community and witnesses. Only when a neighbor remembered the time Mark left home, a forest walker recalled an engine sound, and a colleague shared old memories did the truth gradually emerge. This reminds us that in American society, cooperation with law enforcement and the courage to speak truth remain essential foundations of justice. If you are interested in stories of cases solved through modern technology like the Ethan Merrick case, please subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video with more surprising journeys to uncover the truth.